Although both make you a New Yorker, living in New York City and living outside of it in New York State are completely different. However, New York City only makes up 1% of the square mileage of New York State. So why does 64% of the population live here? We'll be discovering why that is and more facts on the differences between New York State and New York City in today's video. So I'm qualified to do this video in a unique way. I've lived in upstate New York for 18 years and I've lived in New York City for 14 years. So I fully have immersed myself in both areas, and I'm pulling all the things I'm talking about in this video from my experience and actual statistics and facts. So without further ado, let's get started. Wow, huge differences here. New York City has some of the most iconic sites in the entire world. The Statue of Liberty and Central Park, the Brooklyn Bridge. These are all iconic things, and a lot of people, when they think of New York, they think of that. They don't think of the overall state. New York City is the #2 most visited city in the entire world. We have an average of 66 million visitors every single year. It also is home to 37 Michelin-starred restaurants. There's so much to do in New York City that I've dedicated my entire channel to it. It would take me hours to talk about all the things you can do here. So my best advice to you, subscribe to my channel, watch all the videos. Now on to New York State. I spent 18 years in upstate New York before coming to New York City, and one of the big differences is the things to do. I think there's something quaint and charming about small towns, and upstate New York has tons of those. My hometown is Saratoga Springs. We're famous for horse racing. I have an entire guide to it that I'll link below, but my favorite thing to do there is actually going to the Saratoga racetrack. It is one of the oldest continuously operating sports venues in the entire world. It was started in the 1800s, and it is an amazing way to spend the day. I'm here at the Saratoga racetrack. This place is special to me. A lot of people come and sit in like the picnic tables out in the lawn, watch the races, bet, see if they can win big. One time I won $60. It was very exciting. So let's see if I can beat that today. Look at that. I'm here in the paddock. This is where the horses get saddled up right before the races, and this is normally where all of the horse owners are. So I feel very honored to be able to come here today. So we are fortunate to be able to sit in the turf terrace in the clubhouse. It's like the ultimate way to watch the races. So if you're coming here, definitely try to get a table on the turf terrace. It's gonna be a good day. Let's get started. Louis pretending to be our waiter.
You guys like some champagne?
Yes, please take it. Wow. Ah, our horse is running. Oh my God, oh my God.
Jeffrey, that's your horse! Jeffrey, that's your horse! Yours won! No!
Horse won!
We win money, but I don't know, probably like $7, but it's exciting. I thought it was more.
If you want the most up-to-date info on the races, head to americasbestracing.net to get info on horses, betting, what to wear, and more. Don't miss this experience when you're in Saratoga, New York. Let's talk about the landscape and start with New York City. Although New York City used to have a similar landscape to the rest of New York State, today it's quite different, and that's because this was mainly leveled to build skyscrapers like what you see around me. Yes, Central Park is here, and it does hint at what New York City used to look like from a natural perspective. However, would it shock you to learn that Central Park is entirely man-made and designed? None of that really is truly natural. Yes, some of the stones were uncovered there and kept there to make it look natural, but nothing in Central Park just happened to be like that. However, there's one thing that hasn't changed. New York City is surrounded by salt water. We have the Atlantic Ocean, we have the East River and the Hudson River, all surrounding the island of Manhattan and many of the different islands. That is what makes it unique from the rest of New York State, which is not surrounded by salt water for the most part. The natural landscape of New York State can change a lot depending where you are, so I'm going to try to make this as general as possible while staying true to the facts here. There are 54,000 square miles in New York State, and New York City only makes up 302 square miles of that. That's only 0.5% of the overall state. Yet it's what most people focus on. Outside of New York City is some of the most beautiful natural landscapes in all of the state. Although Central Park is the most famous park in New York City, Upstate New York has iconic sites like Niagara Falls, which is the oldest national park in the United States. We also have the Adirondack Mountains, the Catskill Mountains, and those combined are 11,000 square miles. There's also beautiful natural lakes here like the Finger Lakes, Lake George, and then the massive Lake Ontario and Lake Erie, which are two of the largest lakes in the entire United States. Another cool thing about New York State is that we border 6 states. Now, out of all of the 50 states in the United States, one of the unique things about New York State is that it is one of the only 13 states that borders Canada. New York City is nowhere near Canada. In order to drive to the nearest Canadian city is Montreal, and that's about 6.5 hours from New York City. So New York State, pretty cool geographically. Architecture is one of the most distinguishing characteristics that makes New York State and New York City different from each other. New York City is known for its skyscrapers, its apartment living, its brownstones. In total, there are over 6,000 high-rise buildings here, 257 of which are considered skyscrapers, which means they're over 492 feet tall or 150 meters. We have more high-rise buildings than anywhere else in the world except for Hong Kong. And we have the 6th tallest building in the world. It is One World Trade. When it comes to architecture throughout the rest of the state, it can vary, but one thing is for certain. There is no other place outside of New York that has that many skyscrapers. In fact, there are only 2 other skyscrapers outside of New York City across the entire rest of the state. Most of the architecture outside of New York is colonial, Shaker, or federal style homes or lower buildings that are under 150 feet tall or 45 meters. Outside of New York City, life is way more laid back. I remember when I lived in upstate New York, it was more common to just kind of do one major thing a day versus in New York City, you're doing multiple things in a day. For example, when I was in upstate New York, it was common to just go to work and then come home, while in New York City, you go to work, you go out to the bar, you go to a restaurant, then you maybe go to a show. It's like a lot of things in one day versus doing only one main thing in one day. And that is a big difference in lifestyle in New York State versus just New York City. A big difference here in New York City is diversity compared to the rest of New York State. 1 in every 4 New Yorkers is not white or from some other location around the globe. Well, on the other hand, if you go outside of New York City and southern New York, which is bordering New York City, the large majority of the population is white. According to the census, 90 to 97% of all counties above New York are white. Getting around in New York City versus New York State, very, very different. In New York State, you absolutely must have a car. If you don't have a car, it is a nightmare to get anywhere. While in New York City, we pretty much use public transportation exclusively, unless you live in Staten Island, where more than 50% of the people have cars. Cost of living. Be prepared for the largest difference of them all. The cost of living here in New York City, absolutely insane. No one's happy about it. I'm not happy about it. We're all genuinely unsatisfied here, but that's the reality of it. It's because you have so many people living in one space. 8.6 million people live in New York City. On average, a one-bedroom apartment here is around $2,000. Depending on where you're located, it can get as high as $6,000 or even higher than that. Now, if you want to get more information on what costs what in certain boroughs, watch my video on the differences between the boroughs where I go into detail on that. So Western New York is the cheapest place to rent a place in New York State. On average, it's around $650 for a one bedroom there. Not too shabby. Well, compared to New York City, which is nowhere near that. The highest it can fluctuate outside of New York City is around $1,700, but normally you really don't see over $1,000 for a one bedroom anywhere outside of New York City. I definitely thought that before moving here, but that's actually absolutely not the case. 16% of New Yorkers live below the poverty line. I was surprised too. That's almost 2 in every 10, or 1 in 5 New Yorkers live below the poverty line. On the other hand, we have more millionaires here than anywhere else in the state, and we have more billionaires here than everywhere else in the world except for one other location. So we have the second highest amount of billionaires here. So what does that mean? It means the wealth gap in New York City is absolutely extraordinary, and that's not okay. So that's something we definitely need to improve here in New York City, is make income more even across the board. One of the big differences is income. When you think of New York State versus New York City, you think New York City must be the richest. But actually, the place with the highest median household income is outside of New York City. It's in Nassau County in Long Island. On average, they make $111,000 a year. That is their median household income. However, the income varies dramatically. In Western New York, it's anywhere between $54,000 to $63,000. That's the median again. While in Southern New York, it fluctuates a bit more because that's closer to New York City. So that can be anywhere from $63,000 to about $93,000 a year. Northern New York City varies as well, with St. Lawrence County making around $49,000 a year, and then the highest is actually Saratoga Springs. They make around $80,000. That's the median household income up there, and that's probably because of the racetrack, and that is the highest in the upper part of New York. Most of the high incomes are Southern New York, New York City, and Long Island. And those are the main differences between New York City and New York State. Now, if you like this video, you might also like my video on the differences between the 5 boroughs. But you know what? This is the end of the video, so give it a like if you liked it, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.